Hello, hello. How are you?
Hi.
Great to have you. So, hey, everyone. My name is Daniel. I'm our host here today for Founders Live, and I'm super excited to have Melanie Travis, CEO of Andie, with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And so everyone's always in different parts of the world. I'm in Toronto today. Where are you calling from?
I am calling from New York City. I'm in the West Village.
Oh, I love it. I used to stay at my friend's place, always in Chelsea.
Oh, nice.
Back when I was in New York probably like once a month normally for something
Oh,
or another.
man. Yep. Not surprised. Well, it's still a
Yeah.
great city, so you should come back.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. I have many fond memories, probably for the past year or two. My friend Kunal, he's not really into social, but if you're watching Kunal, thank you. He also let me slept on his couch in Chelsea. When he was traveling, I would get his room, which was nice. Or before that, my friend Nikolai, he let me stay at his place in Williamsburg. So for a while, we had an office with my last company up on Madison and 30th. So I would do the L train across, which seems like the I can only picture it now. Like it was literally a sardine. Like imagine that today. Like that's just not cool.
I know. I cannot imagine getting smushed on a train with tons of people anymore. It feels like another world.
But awesome. Pratik, thank you. So he's excited about the session, excited to have you all listening. So, really, I just wanted to kind of, as I was trying to think about where's the best place to start, and I didn't really send this in the questions, but it clicked to me that what I think is unique is you end up, running this amazing company that we'll get to, but your career started in film and television, and I'm always very fascinated by this. And so you studied, not business, not retail, not fashion, and maybe let's start there. Of like,
Sure.
thinking back to when you were thinking about where to go for undergrad. What did you envision doing with your life at that point?
Yeah, wow, that's going way back, which is fun because I don't usually get to go back that far. I wish it wasn't as far back as it is. So, well, I mean, it's probably worth saying I grew up in New York City, so really from here, from these parts, and decided to go to school on the Eastern Seaboard, where I know. So I went to Haverford for undergrad. It's just a sort of liberal arts school. Didn't have a clear direction of what I wanted to do. Ended up majoring in comparative literature. So definitely, probably as far away from marketing and finance as you can get. And then I still didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I decided to go to grad school for filmmaking. And I liked. I think, and this is where it probably the first sparks, if I came from a business-minded family, may have hit, but it didn't come till much later. But I knew that I loved the idea of having a story, having a vision, telling a story, getting people excited about a vision, a narrative, assembling a group together to sort of build that narrative. And so that is very much what building a brand is. But at the time, my parents are artists. I didn't know anything about starting a business. And I thought, I'll go to film school and make movies because that sounds like making a movie. So that's really why I went to film school. And then I made a couple short films that toured the festival circuit before I realized, oh, wait a minute. I really like this, but I like business. So let's marry those.
And was there something in particular about doing, because starting a short film is just, in my mind, another business. You have this product, which is the film, and you have to market it and distribute it, and hopefully people watch it, and hopefully enough people are interested in it that they pay you somehow for it. What was that? Can you tell me the story of either your first short film or your favorite short film that you produced?
Yeah. I mean, the first short film that I made that went to a festival was called The Apartment. And fun fact, actually, Anthony, for anyone who watches Queer Eye, Anthony was my star. This was like I don't know, 15 years ago or so. So I found him before he blew up, and now everyone knows him. I actually see him walking around the West Village every now and then. So
That's
fun fact
amazing.
about that film. But in any case, so I needed to raise money to make a movie, just like you do for a business. And so I
Yeah,
turned to Kickstarter, and I raised funds for my first film via crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter.
very cool.
And once I had raised the money, I went out and hired my crew. The gaffers, the lighting, the sound, the cast, the whole
Yeah,
thing, which is very similar to just hiring your startup team.
yeah.
And then we went out and made our film with Anthony. And then then I had to pitch it around to a bunch of festivals to try to get it in a festival. Now, a short film is not really going to get picked up by like a Netflix or an Amazon, or I mean, some do, not mine. And so that's sort of where it ends. It's almost like a business, like a capsule business, and then it's
Yeah.
over and you're on to the next.
Yeah, and I'm just fascinated on anyone who's kind of you pitch something before you started a business. Like, what is who are you trying to pitch to run it at a festival, and what are they looking for, right? Like they're investing, I guess, a slot versus money,
Yeah,
right?
totally. I mean, you have to just like when you're looking for investors, frankly, not to like belabor the parallel, but I do think it is interesting, and people don't really pick up on that as often as you are. You have to look for the festivals that want what you've got. Like, first of all, obviously from a length perspective, are they short film festivals? From a theme perspective, this was not a CGI motion graphics, thing. So I didn't go to the festivals that specialize in those types of films. It was really a little art film, a 10-minute little sort of New York City based independent film, and so I catered the pitches to the festivals that specialize in showcasing those types of movies.
Hmm. And what was the summary of the apartment? What's the if can we
Oh
find
my
it somewhere? Can tell us what the pitch was or the story?
I haven't talked about the apartment in like maybe it's been 20 years. No, I'm not that old. No, maybe 10 years. So the apartment is about a woman whose neighbor calls because the neighbor has gone out of town and needs her to, I think the premise was like water the plants or something. But
Mm,
the point is that the neighbor goes to this apartment, it's empty, and she basically, over the course of a few minutes, starts to imagine she just lived a completely different life than the one that she has
oh, very
while
cool.
she's in her neighbor's apartment.
And Anthony, what did he play? What was
He
his role?
played the like it's loose whether it's the boyfriend or the husband
Yeah.
of the protagonist. So he was in the original apartment, which was actually filmed in my apartment. So he was in my apartment, and he was there at the beginning, and then at the end when the girl comes home with this like sort of puzzled look on her face because she's just literally lived another life, Anthony's like, "Where have you been? Why were you gone for so long?"
That's amazing. That's another little thing. You can find that old apartment and do tours of it. That's a very New York thing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's where Anthony first filmed one of his first short films.
Oh, and I just realized he's Canadian, isn't he? He's from Toronto, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there you go.
So, yeah.
Canadians everywhere. We all migrate to New York, really,
Yeah.
for stuff like that. But but like you were in film and television for again. I'm just going off of your LinkedIn, which is the easiest summary I have. You're there
Yeah.
for almost like 3 years at least. After
Hmm.
you finished schooling in that.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, how does that? So this obviously kind of answers my question of how you eventually ended up at Kickstarter. It sounds like that played a huge part in your early film career.
It
Um,
did. It did.
but yeah, what's happening towards the end of, let's say, 2012? That looks like when you start at Foursquare at that
Foursquare.
point. But I imagine it was not an instant like, oh, cool, Foursquare's hiring, I'm going to go jump into that. You spent a pretty significant part of your early career in film and television.
Yeah. Well, the real story is you don't make much money when you're making short films that are kind of esoteric. And so to sort of pay the bills, I was also working as sort of a PA, a production assistant, or random roles on reality shows that film around New York. And back then, they were all the rage. They were filming all the time. And I remember one in particular, I was always going on set somewhere in Queens. It was a reality show from TLC about like grown men who still live with their moms and like the
Wow.
arguments that ensue. And I was just going all over the boroughs to, basically hold a lunch pail on these sets, and thought like, maybe this isn't the industry for me. Maybe there's something else out there. I didn't know what it was, but I was just sort of open to leaving that industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't hate it. Maybe I'll go back one day, although it won't be to hold someone's, lunchbox on a reality show set. And at the time, again, I grew up in New York, so a lot of my friends are here or came back here after college, and a few of my friends had started working at this like hot new startup called Foursquare. And I was using Foursquare. I was a user of it. That
Mm.
was back in the day when you used to check in everywhere to try to become mayor of like your favorite
Yeah.
coffee spot
Yeah.
and stuff. And I just thought it was so cool that friends of mine were working at this app that I loved to use. And it hadn't like clicked for me that you could work at a place that has a product that you love. I was just like, I really grew up in the art world and then was doing this film thing. And so long story short, one of my friends was like, come into Foursquare. We're always hiring interns. And, internship was something I was interested in, despite the fact that I was, I don't know, maybe 25 or so at the time, because it wasn't a commitment. These were
Mm.
3 months. They had a 3-month rotating internship program. It was paid. And I thought, okay, I'm not saying I'm leaving film, but I'm going to go to intern at this like cool app for
Yeah.
3 months and like learn about what the tech ecosystem in New York is like. And as you can tell from the rest of my LinkedIn, I fell in love just head over heels with the tech industry in New York, with the startup ecosystem. I just was so enamored with this fast-paced life and everything that was happening. And it swept me off my feet. And, I never went back. I consider Andie and Kickstarter, all these companies that I either worked at or started, to be part of the tech ecosystem, whether it's fashion or something else.
100%.
So I
I
never
mean,
went back.
that must be an interesting transition too, of like at this point, not that you never sat down to work on all your screenplays and everything like that, but this is the first time you're like sitting in an office and like the same. Like, do you remember what that first day was like when you walked into the Foursquare offices?
Yeah, well, I thought the offices were really cool. I think they were in the process of installing a slide from one floor. It was like when you think about a cool, like well-funded startup, like
Yeah.
Foursquare was that. It was, there was a huge kitchen that had like, whiskey, beer, everything you could possibly want, Lucky Charms in the morning. I felt like a kid. Like I was so excited about working at a place like that. It was like a play. There's a ping pong table. I mean, now it's all kind of cliche, but back then,
Yeah.
I was so excited. And this is funny talking about this during COVID, but I had never, in the film industry, you work on a totally different schedule. So if they call you from like 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., that's when you're working. You're just always on a
Mhm.
different schedule. And suddenly I found myself commuting. You talked about sardines on the L train. I lived in Brooklyn at the time, and I found myself commuting with like the mass of people who,
Oh
most
wow,
people
yeah.
do have a sort of 9 to 5, 10 to 6, whatever. And I actually thought that was joyful too. I was suddenly living on the same sort of plane as my
Yeah.
neighbors, as people in the community. And I thought, like, commuting's not so bad. I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. So this is all maybe like starry eyed, whatever. But I loved it. I really loved it.
Mm. I always felt that when I was in New York too. I mean, Toronto, in the scheme of Canada, it's a fast paced city, but New York always operated at another level. And I've been
Hmm.
around the U.S. too. I've been in L.A. and San Francisco. I
Hmm.
spent probably a year and a half in Cincinnati when
Mm.
we set up an office there for my last company. And the funny, actually enough, I from 2014 to probably mid 2015, I would basically be a third of my time in Cincinnati in an apartment there, sleeping
Mm.
on my friend's couch in New York. We're just starting our company. We're trying to launch into the US basically. And so I'd be
That's
doing this L
awesome.
train. And back and forth was so like New York would just like jack me up. And then
Boom.
Cincinnati would be like, hey, like I was in a co working space there. Very, very different of just like, oh yeah, I guess it's 4:30. Like the thing is just a ghost town on like Tuesday at 4:30 of like,
Oh my
like
God.
the office I'm at in New York is just starting at 4:30. Like,
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting to when you have that kind of contact, like to leave and come back really gives you
yeah.
context for how different the city can be. And yeah.
And I definitely feel that pacing too. I remember this one day, it may seem a bit like dramatic of how I described, but I was actually very fascinated by it. When you get out of the L train on, I can't remember what the stations you go to the 6th train. I think it's 14th Street Union Square, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I used to go out there and switch to the 6th to go up to Madison and 30th. And I remember the minute, like that was one of the main stops where everyone gets off. And it felt like I was like salmon in a river because we'd all get off,
Yeah. And
we'd all go up.
everyone
Yeah. And then
flows.
you
Yep.
start splitting into your own little, okay, this is the 6th train, this is the 4 train
Yep.
contingent, this is the other whatever contingent.
Yeah.
And then I remember at one point we were like going, and maybe I just psyched myself out, but I swear to God, like we were walking in unison, like in my head, it sounded like we were like marching up the stairs together.
That's exactly right. Oh my God. Wow, it's been like 13 months or so since I've taken the train. So that is giving me some serious memories and nostalgia for that. But
I know.
totally.
It'll
That's
be back,
fun.
I'm sure. New York is a resilient place. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
minute we can pile onto the L train, if they don't shut it
Yeah.
down,
Yeah.
that
Oh,
will
that's
be good.
funny.
So anyway, going back to life. So you're at Foursquare, and then
Yep.
eventually you find your way to Kickstarter, which sounds like that was more of your first permanent non-internship type of role. How did that come about?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, once I was at Foursquare, I knew that I really liked this idea of like working a sort of regular job. I loved
Mhm.
startups, whatever. But Foursquare probably wasn't the permanent home for me, because I did have this sort of more creator background, and Kickstarter was a natural fit for so many reasons. And when they were hiring one of their first marketing, like, full time. I don't remember what the title was, but it was
Mhm.
essentially a marketing coordinator role. And so I threw my name in the ring, and was able to point to films I had made on Kickstarter, and that I've helped folks in the film community create Kickstarter campaigns. So it was kind of a no brainer, and yeah, I got hired, and then I started really sort of building my career. That's how I really got started on the marketing path, which is
Yeah.
still. I mean, obviously I'm the CEO, but like I'm constantly working with the marketing team at my company because I started my career really in
Yeah.
outside of film, inside a marketing department, and learned a ton. Loved
Yeah.
it. Really loved it.
You're, I guess, as on the marketing side, I guess you wouldn't be touching specific campaigns, but was there any memorable Kickstarter campaigns that you were involved with, or kind of at the
Oh
company
yeah. I
while you
mean,
were
it
there?
was it was like a wild time for Kickstarter while I was there. While I was there, we went from an apartment building, literally an apartment on the Lower East Side where the door was covered in graffiti, to this like massive, beautiful building that they now have in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of key projects that happened while I was there that were really big for us. There was the Pebble
Yeah.
watch. I don't know if you remember that. That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
big project. Zach Braff did a crowdfunding campaign for, I can't remember a film that he was making, but like it was when celebrities started to turn to Kickstarter too, which was a really
Oh,
big
very cool.
move for Kickstarter. I think Spike Lee did a Kickstarter campaign. There were a lot of like pretty important names who were coming onto the platform, to not because like they needed money, but again to just sort of move away from the traditional studio
Yeah.
ecosystem where like it sucks all your creativity and stuff. And so it was yeah, there was a big time at Kickstarter, and grew a lot with them.
Yeah. So it must have been like a crazy just a year, and so much happened. That was the heyday of.
It was a little over a year. So much happened. It was really, I can't, like, looking back, I can't believe that was only a little over a year.
Yeah, when you say Pebble, my co-founder knows Eric. They went to the same university
Mm.
together, and I
Oh
remember.
wow,
Can't remember,
funny.
they were I think he came to some dinner we hosted, or I can't remember him like doing a talk through my co-founder's name, Ray.
Hmm, hmm.
And then we both know Jesse Horowitz as
Oh
well.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my
So
God.
Jesse was the one who kicked off our new season of this interview series, call it
Oh
a month
fun.
ago. Yeah.
And as you know, Jesse and I are good friends, so
Yeah.
small world.
Small world. It's funny, as another digression, there's been a lot of New York entrepreneurs I've been talking to. We chatted
Oh
with Phil
yeah.
Krim last week
Oh
from
yeah. Wow, cool.
Capture.
Yep.
And then who's coming up? I think we're scheduling with Nadia from Dia and Co. based out of
Oh,
New York.
Dia
Yeah.
and I, or Dia and I, Dia and Andy, or Nadia and I, just did our first partnership. So you can now buy Andie Swim on Dia, and Dia and Andy sort of did a
Oh, very
co-branded
cool.
collection together with custom colors, and it was really fun. And then Nadia and I did an Instagram live together about 2 weeks ago to talk about how we brought that collection to life.
Oh, very
Let's talk
cool.
about a small ecosystem. You're
Yeah.
talking to all my friends.
There we go. That's the whole plan. No, it's
Yeah.
that's what I love about New York, especially the D2C ecosystem. Because as you can, I don't know where your office is. When we used to go to offices, in Chelsea,
Yeah.
I remember I was like a 15-minute walk from anyone I would meet. From like
Yeah.
HelloFresh to this to that, like all the companies with those are all of our
Yep.
clients in our last business was all around Lower
That's
East
how it
Side to
goes.
Chelsea.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really tight knit, and even if I mean, our office is in the garment district because we're like on the fashion side, but
Yeah.
But like the dinner, like you even mentioned a dinner earlier. The pre-COVID, I was probably at a dinner almost every night of the week, organized by either an investor or an editor or whatever. And so the community here is very tight.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll
Yeah.
go back to that.
Oh, I'm sure very soon. I want to quickly touch on Bark and then really get to the story of Andie. But so you're at Kickstarter for that's why we could talk for like 2-3 hours, I'm sure.
It's fun though. No one ever goes this far back. I usually just tell the Andie story. So
This is where it's just all the kernels are way back.
Yeah. Oh,
So
and here
hello.
comes. This is my wife bringing me coffee.
Oh,
It's
amazing.
perks
How
of
do you
working
take
from home.
I love it. How do you take I was just finishing my coffee.
Oh,
What do you take in your
nice.
coffee?
Just milk, no sugar.
Oh,
I do like a
that's good.
Milky Bodega coffee. That one's pretty good.
Yeah, no, I drink so much coffee, so I do black coffee, or if I'll go to
Oh,
a coffee
wow.
shop, I'll do like the steamed milk on my coffee. But
No espresso shots inside your coffee, though.
oh, I've done that sometimes. Do they
Oh,
call it a
man.
red eye or a black
Yeah.
eye? Yeah.
Yeah, that was popular at Foursquare. Everyone dropping espresso shots in their coffee, and I was like,
I've lived
no,
that
this
life
is
before.
not for
Not
me.
now. I just do. I'm fancy. I do my little Chemex, a little pour
Oh,
over.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So or
Cool.
Nespresso. I churn through Nespressos, and
Wow.
I have all the recycling bags full of them. And yeah.
That's cool. Maybe I should get one of those.
But yeah. So anyway, so Barkbox or Barkbox, Bark, and how does that manifest from Kickstarter?
Yeah, well, actually, speaking of dinners, it all started at a dinner. And there's a guy, you probably know him, but there's a guy named Charlie O'Donnell,
Hmm.
who is an investor in the New York tech ecosystem. And pre-COVID, he was running a series of what he called tech dinners, and people in different neighborhoods would host a dinner, and random people in that neighborhood who happened to work in tech would get together. And I knew Charlie, so I hosted a tech dinner in Greenpoint. I was living in Greenpoint, Brooklyn at the time.
Hmm.
And there were just like other people who worked in tech who lived in Greenpoint that literally came to my apartment for dinner. And of the guests at that dinner was this guy named Jonathan Basker. I don't know why I'm using all the names, not like they mean anything, but that's just how the story goes.
Hmm.
And Jonathan Basker was working as a recruiter at Barkbox. I had never heard of Barkbox at the time
Yeah.
because I was still relatively new to the tech scene, and I knew these like high flying apps and platforms, but I was not familiar with Barkbox. However, I loved dogs, and you
Hmm.
haven't seen her, but I do have an amazing dog, a pit bull who often
Oh,
likes to make cameos. Um,
more than
and so
welcome.
I'm totally obsessed with dogs. Jonathan observed this at the dinner, knew that I was working in marketing at Kickstarter, that I had also worked at Foursquare, that I was obsessed with dogs, and they happened to be hiring a higher level marketer basically at
Hmm.
Barkbox. And, he's a good recruiter. He was like, this person would be a great fit. And so, I was very happy at Kickstarter. I did not intend on leaving, but he really, he brought me to the office. I saw it's like I mentioned, Foursquare is a playground for, recently graduated adults who want to play in startups. Barkbox is that for dogs. I mean, it is
I
like
love
there's
it.
a jungle gym for dogs. There's toy mountains. It is a dog's dream office.
Amazing.
And I, my jaw hit the floor. And I thought, I think I have to be here. These are my people. These are all dog people. So
Yeah.
that's how I ended up at Bark. It wasn't like a, passion for subscription services or, whatever. It was really this guy, Jonathan, who and my love for dogs. And I ended up staying there quite a while, for
Yeah.
like almost 4 years, I think.
Yeah. And so what were some of the highlights of that time there? Like, do you remember given that you're passionate about I guess not the product, but the end consumer, in this case, the dog, or
Mhm.
the dog owner and the dog. What were some of your, proudest accomplishments of what you created there?
I think for me, a thing that I saw very early when I joined Bark is that it was just Barkbox at the time, this monthly box of toys and treats for dogs.
Yeah.
Um, but it was so much bigger than the like transactional element of what you saw on the site. It was so
Hmm.
much more than just like buying this box and getting it. I was observing through other things that the team had put together prior to my getting there, and then also starting to receive Barkbox myself. It's
Hmm.
this like magical moment when the dog receives his or her Barkbox, and it's
Yeah.
this like unbridled joy. It's this like moment that a dog parent and the dog shares together. And so, what I really wanted to do was amplify that part of the story.
Hmm.
And so, did things like launched Barkfest, which they don't do anymore, obviously COVID and other reasons, but Barkfest was the world's largest, basically like party for dogs. So
That's
like,
amazing.
I guess it's a long-winded answer of, my most proud thing is throwing the world's biggest party for dogs.
Was that held in New York or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we actually held one in Toronto too, but a very much smaller version at one point because Canada is a big market
Yeah.
for bark. But they were in New York. We rented out a whole pier along the west side, closed it down for just for dogs, and
Oh
had
my
like
God.
just everything a dog would want, just like Disney for dogs, basically.
I would love. Can we find that on YouTube somewhere? My friend is
Oh,
also.
probably.
I would like because my so many different connections. A friend of mine, him and his family run it's something called the McCann. I'm going to butcher the name, but it's like the McCann family here in just outside of Toronto.
Hmm.
They are like kind of world renowned dog trainers in agility competitions, and their family have won like many medals around the
Whoa.
world doing agility,
Oh, that's
whatever
awesome.
drills. And like you go to their house and they have like 8 dogs, just like that's their dogs. Never mind all the dogs they've trained. I think they've trained like 100,000 dogs in their life, and this would be so up their alley. And he's doing some work on trying to figure out how to bridge the world of like he's brought that business online to doing dog training online. They have a whole content business around that, and they're trying to do some more stuff on the not-for-profit side around it too. So
Oh,
anyways.
amazing. That's really cool. I love all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, yeah, if you Googled Barkfest, Barkbox, there's probably videos on
We'll find
YouTube or
it.
something.
That would have been a good short film.
Yeah.
You attach a GoPro to like the dogs, and then
Oh yeah,
like
we
there would
did
be
that quite a lot. It was so much fun. I really had a great time at Bark. I've been very
Yeah,
lucky in my career.
yeah.
Always loved where I worked.
I mean, so it sounds like you obviously had a lot of fun at Bark, but so that always begs the question: where does the seed of Andie come from? And obviously,
Yeah.
running something yourself is a great accomplishment. It's also like the most stressful thing you can ever pick to do in your life. So yeah.
Accurate.
Well, where does the seed come from of like, everyone can read the origin story. If you're trying to find a swimsuit, can't find the right one,
Right.
this needs to be better.
Right.
Everyone has that issue. Only
Right.
like a couple of people like, you know what? The solution to this is
something about
I'm going to go start a company.
Yeah.
That's not the
Yeah.
logical leap for most people.
That's really true. And I can for sure say that my parents, my family thought I loved my job. I felt I was fulfilled. I was well compensated. And then I turned to them one day and I was like, I'm quitting so I can sell swimsuits on the internet. And they were like, you have lost your mind. So I mean, I think it goes back. It does go back to the film school in my early days in film. I really have always had the bug to tell my story, whatever that is, and to, I studied how to be a director. I mean, a director of a movie, but in many ways, being a director, I mean, that's kind of what I am now, as CEO. And I think it's something that I'm good at. It's something that I'm passionate about from a role perspective. And even though I loved all of my jobs, I had this sort of nagging feeling in the back of my head that I was building someone else's story.
Mhm.
And that's just, I mean, everyone's different. Some people really just want to be at the helm of what they do, and others never want to do that, but want to be a number two or whatever, which is great. I think whatever your calling or your stripe is great. I just knew mine, and I had to do something on my own. But at this point, I knew that it wasn't going back and making a movie. I had learned so much about startups. I had learned about the venture community. I had learned about raising capital, talk about the Clearbank story. I had learned how you take an idea from a seed stage and like build a community around it, raise capital for it, et cetera. And so, going, as I was going through my time at Barkbox, I loved it, but I was always in the back of my head thinking like, what's mine? What's my Bark going to be? What's my Kickstarter? Like, what's mine going to be? Always. And eventually the story, we went on a work retreat. I struggled with the swimsuit, and hearing everyone on the work retreat at Barkbox talk about how much they hated shopping for a swimsuit, that was my light bulb. This is going to be my thing. I'm going to start a swim company, and maybe it'll fail, and that's fine. And by the way, if it fails, like, maybe I'll come back to Barkbot. Like no shame, no harm, whatever. And so it was really, in some ways the seed was there, from the time I graduated from college. It just took a while to figure out what the manifestation of it was going to look like.
And were there any other competing? I guess if you didn't do Andie, was there another idea, 2 or 3 that you were debating?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Andie wasn't the first idea I had. every now and then I would come up with something and start chasing it down. And I didn't
Mhm.
actually leave Barkbox and I did a crowdfunding campaign for Andie when I first started, and I didn't actually quit Barkbox until I had completed the crowdfunding campaign as a sort of like pressure test of
Yeah.
like there would be an audience for this new idea.
Mhm.
Um, but I think I love to travel, and so I had an idea for a travel app that with like personalized recommendations. I don't even, but like it required, I'm not a developer. It required engineering resources. I had lots of other ideas, but the reality of my situation was like I didn't, you know, I was about to say I didn't have any skills. It's not that I didn't have any skills, but like it was something that I could do
Yep.
relatively on my own to get started. That
Mhm.
wouldn't require an enormous amount of capital. That wouldn't require skills that I didn't have. And making swimsuits is hard. I had no background in production, but I could learn how you make a garment,
Mhm.
and I could meet the right people. And it's not a very capital intensive business, at least in the very beginning, before you're trying to hit scale. And
Mhm.
so it was doable, which is one of the reasons that I did it.
Yeah, well, on the point, like I loved food, and I remember the first business idea I tried to work on. I was fortunate to go through some accelerator right out of college to try to build something, and the same thing. It's just like I love food, but it wasn't really it was a terrible idea, and I couldn't move the business forward until something was
Mm,
built. And so
mm,
I think it's more the way I was frame it. It's that I am sure if you really were excited about it, you could learn to become a developer. But the gap to get
right.
there is so large. Whereas for
Exactly.
garments, I was like, okay, I don't know how to do that, but the gap is smaller. I can get there sooner. It's not going to take
Exactly.
3 years of like learning C++ and all that to be a
Yeah.
somewhat a below mediocre developer.
Exactly. I think sometimes, perfect is the enemy of good, and like I think that's a thing for people to remember. And it
Mhm.
was like this is an achievable thing right now. I mean, it's grown certainly. I didn't think that it was achievable to do what I now do, but sometimes you also get lucky. Right place, right category, right time.
Yeah. So the Kickstarter obviously goes well enough that you can quit your job at Barkbox.
Yep.
What was the first collection, or first kind of what was the first collection you produced and shipped?
Yeah, so the crowdfunding campaign went well enough that I could quit. Not to like collect another paycheck. I went for over a year, unpaid, which is often, I'm sure, the same is the case for you. This is
Mhm.
often the case for early entrepreneurs. But it was enough to put in an order for. I could afford approximately 400 swimsuits with what I had raised on in my campaign, and so that's what I did. I um, put in an order for 400 swimsuits. I found a designer. I used LinkedIn. I scoured LinkedIn for like freelance swimwear designer and then exported the results and called them all. And this woman that I happened to have a particularly good conversation with, I was like, "Hey, how much would you charge
Great.
if you designed a couple swimsuits for me?"
Mhm.
And it was affordable. So she designed 3 styles. I sent them to a boutique manufacturer that I had previously identified
Mhm.
to make them, and they were like, okay, and just give me about 150 of each across, extra small to extra large. It was like so basic. I only had
Yeah.
black fabric. I'm skipping through all the gory details of how you actually bring a garment to life, but suffice it to say, it was a fairly like it was an ABC process. I followed the steps. As the 400 swimsuits were, being produced, I did go out to some angel investors to say like, I'm going to launch this. I wanted a little bit more cash in order to, have a designer make a logo, a color palette, type something that made it feel like a D2C brand.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time at Bark, so I sort of understand the importance of, branding.
Mhm.
Um, and then we needed to take high quality photos of the product, and I had to hire models I mean, I was learning everything as I was going. I had only previously worked with dog models, and I could tell you that dogs and like human models behave quite differently on set. So a lot of learnings there. But long story short, so I left Bark at the end of December 2000 2016.
Yeah.
And we launched Andie. So all of that, like fundraising from angels, making the 400 swimsuits, getting the website up, all of that stuff. I basically did that in Q1 of 2017, and we were able to launch andieswim.com in April 2017. We're actually celebrating in a couple days our 4th birthday of being live.
Wow. Congratulations. Fourth
Thanks.
anniversary. That's huge.
I had no idea if you had told me at the time that I'd be doing this 4 years later, and that I will have had grown this brand into. I mean, it's like crazy that it's like this global swimwear brand that hundreds of thousands of women have bought tens of millions of dollars of swimsuits from like, I remember when I put in that first order of 400 swimsuits, this lady that was helping me with the development of it was like, 400 swimsuits is a lot. You don't need to order 400. You could do 100 swimsuits. And if she knew, I think our last, like we have, I think tomorrow we have 400,000 swimsuits hitting the warehouse, and then we'll have another order of 400,000. So it's just
It's
crazy.
insane. It's insane. Oh my God. And you talked about your angel investor and like early investor journey. What was that like? Who were the first couple people you talked to, and then who ended up putting in the first check to fund the business outside of
Yeah.
Kickstarter, I guess.
Yeah. So really, like, this is maybe a terrible term, but it's what it is. It's just high net worth individuals in my community. And I mean, I at the time was not really friends with what one might call high net worth individuals. So it was a lot of like, when people say a friends and family round, they don't usually mean that it's actually your friends or your
Yeah.
family.
Unless you're only friends with high net worth individuals.
Yeah, exactly. So I did a lot. I mean, I was just networking like crazy. I was going to everything. I was taking every meeting. I was asking for every intro. I was as humble as one can possibly be, and literally just hit the pavement every day to tell my story of, why I wanted to start Andie and what I believed this could be, and blah blah blah, and managed to cobble together about $100,000 over probably a 6 month, the first six
Wow.
months of 2017. Um, and that's all the money that I had to get this thing going. And it depends who you talk to. Some people say that's a lot. Some people say it's nothing. But we launched with less than 5 digits in the bank account. I think like it was just tiny,
Yeah.
and then it just started. It started growing, and like over the years, really have taken a sort of strategic approach to raising capital, and have alternatively gone to investors, and then also to sources like Clearbank to raise capital as we grew.
Yeah. Well, Tanya made sure I have to say hello.
Yeah, Tanya's been great. Love working with Tanya.
And so, yeah. So on that, so you get your kind of angel check. It launches.
Yep.
Then eventually, it sounds like you've done more subsequent rounds of whether you call it your seed, Series A, whatever the letters in the alphabet soup you want to call it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We've raised now to date, we've raised about 8.5 million of like venture capital, but not from any like, we didn't go after what you would probably consider sort of blue chip consumer funds by design, because I think there's a difference when you're growing a company. If you want to grow at all costs, which for some businesses absolutely makes sense, and you just you get your returns later, or if you want to grow profitably. And I just my philosophy has always been, for the type of business that I'm growing, I want to grow quickly, but I also want to grow profitably, and that's sometimes at odds with the traditional VC model. I mean, I love I have nothing against that. That's not a slam on VCs. I think they serve a very important purpose in helping to grow businesses. But I never believed it was like quite right for Andie, which is why our checks have come from either individuals or like small sort of like niche funds.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about the VC product or asset class, it requires, 10x returns or some substantial return on capital for the model to work. Therefore, the only way to actually generate those kinds of returns is to generate crazy, crazy, crazy growth, knowing that there's this downside risk that some part of the portfolio will flame out, and then some part of the portfolio will crush it. And it's that part that crushes it that returns the fund. And so there's certain businesses that are built for that, and certain ones that are not built for that. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that, I don't think that fashion precludes a company from being able to deliver outsized returns, but I do think that it's a different approach to getting there. And I think oftentimes, I mean, I face this almost every single month, certainly every quarter, the juncture of, we can drive this much revenue if we're willing to spend, X per customer, then we can acquire this many customers. But like, if we're willing to spend X, we might lose, a buck or two on every customer, or we spend slightly less so that we're profitable on every order. And that just means we're going to have less revenue, but we're also going to have this profit. And like, you choose, and it's a choice that every, CEO or entrepreneur should make. And I choose, growth with profit, not like
Yeah.
not forgetting profit. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's a calculus.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We actually have one question, so I'll kind of this. She introduced herself earlier with someone from the UK watching us. Hello, Kim. Thank you.
Cool. Hi.
And so that's just a bit about her, and this is her question. So I'll reframe it slightly. I'm not asking you to share any specific numbers or things like that, but I think it'd be helpful to understand more of like how have you thought about your fundraising strategy from a dilution perspective, and then what is the long-term vision for Andie in terms of an exit strategy? Is it to keep it? What's your view there? And thank you, Kim, for the question.
Yeah. Cool. Hello in the UK. So yeah, in terms of dilution, it's not something that I have been overly concerned with. Now I haven't raised a ton of capital, so I still have meaningful ownership in the business. But Andie is my first business, and I think, as is probably clear from my background, I really love starting these things, and I certainly hope that Andie is not my last business. And I think there's something to be said for having a win, having a win under your belt. And so when I went out and raised, and as I approached, other strategic business partners, I have a strategic partnership with a manufacturer where I, traded equity for services. So I've used equity to my, for a variety of purposes, and I haven't like hoarded it because I want to build a strong business and show that I can build a strong business. And so I have not been overly concerned with dilution. And again, I think that's also because I intend on building another business, which speaks to the second part of the question on the long-term vision. I think what we've started to build, and we've really just scratched the surface, is a global brand for women that serves women, particularly vulnerable items such as swim. And I think swim is the first of many categories we will go into. But I also think that like finding a home for the business inside of a larger, whatever place is probably the eventual right move. So this is like a fancy way of saying like I'll sell the business at some point.
One day
I mean,
soon. To some
I don't know why I'm belaboring that point, but like that's
the exit strategy is to sell at some
and
point.
then I'll do another one. I'm definitely a serial entrepreneur, and I'm really excited for whatever the next idea is. If you have one, let me know.
Yeah, we can. Our next dinner we'll brainstorm in New York. You touched on a very interesting point, and I guess it's not surprising that like all the because I talked to Jesse about this actually a lot. But one of the key things he did with Hubble is exactly what you did, was negotiate with his manufacturer an equity stake. And I would just love it. You're the only second person I've had a chance to talk to about this strategy, but I think it's really, really an important tool for a lot of D2C businesses. Can you talk to me about how did that come about? How did the negotiation go with your manufacturer? What do you think got them excited to give you? I assume the trade is you're giving equity in exchange for a better deal on MOQs or margins or whatnot. But I would love to know more about that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, well, if we rewind a little back to 2017, so I started Andie. I had, I had like tens of thousands of dollars when launched, but eventually cobbled together $100,000. But I was spending it obviously faster than it was coming in. And I knew within a few months of launch that this could work, that this really could. It had enough organic traction, enough positive, sort of feedback on the product, on the idea, on the brand positioning, that I felt like it could work. And so I wanted to go out and raise, like a meaningful seed, like a $2 million seed round or whatever. But I also knew that I just didn't have what it took to scale. I didn't have any infrastructure. I was selling the swimsuits from my living room. And like, we weren't even on Shopify. We were just on some random hacky site. This was like, I mean, it was a real business, but it was like barely making the cut as a real. So I knew if I wanted to go and raise money, I'd need to like start to establish some kind of infrastructure for the business. And the first thing I wanted to do was have a strong supply chain, because at the end of the day, that's something I know nothing about. Like, how do you source factories and fabric overseas? How do you make a good quality swimsuit at scale? How do you have, the right margin profile to scale? I knew those were things that I didn't have that I would want if I was going to raise money. And so before I went out to raise capital from investors, I actually tried to find a manufacturer who would work with me on a deal where I also wanted net payment terms, which is, from a working capital perspective, extremely important. It enables you to put in orders for swim or whatever your product is before you have to pay for it. So long story short, I went around with Jesse. We went together to all these different manufacturers around the city. He has a bunch of contacts for a variety of reasons. We would like grab a burger at Burger King in the garment district and then cross the street and pitch some manufacturers. And the idea was like, look, like I've been working in the startup ecosystem. I'm a great D2C marketer. I understand how to build community and acquire customers efficiently online. You guys are like, world-class supply chain swim manufacturers, fully optimized supply chain. This could be a beautiful partnership where they would get a foot in this new, world of e-com that they were eager to be a part of, and I would have a really strong, manufacturing relationship. And that was basically the pitch. And we went around. This was probably fall of 2017. And to all the major manufacturers that do swim, and I ended up striking a deal with basically with one where it made sense. And in the deal, I gave them an equity stake in the business in exchange for favorable payment terms, better pricing. Our office is in their office now. So that's how that came about. And then on the back of that deal, I went out to raise a $2.5 million seed round. And was successful right away because it also de-risked, partnering with a major manufacturer, de-risked the proposition for a lot of investors.
That's great. That's great. As we're coming towards time, I'll steal a question that I remember I had a chance to listen to a couple of your episodes from the podcast that you had done a year or so ago. And I like the way you frame it, is the sink or swim moment. I'm getting that right. So can you think about a moment in Andie? What would be your sink or swim moment for Andie that comes to mind?
Oh, man.
And I know there's more than one, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say they change every day. If I'd prepped, I would have had a clean answer. The things that come to mind, just like gut reaction, are like product planning, inventory. I mean, I think, it's something I've struggled with, and sometimes we don't have the product. And then like when you need to make revenue, suddenly it's like, shoot, we didn't order. And then I think this isn't really sink or swim, but hiring, now that we're 4 years in and I've a little over 20 people on the team, I've realized that hiring is extremely important. And I mean, my team is amazing, but it's not, I think it can become a sink or swim if you hire in an emergency, which founders often do when they're pressed for time. And building a great team is going to be what probably sets your business apart in the long run.
Yeah. Well, I've mentioned inventory in particular must be so difficult given how seasonal the business is.
It's a challenge. It is it's one of the hardest things to get right. You don't want too much in the off season, but you want enough in the on season. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why my short story why I joined Clearbank was for that reason. Like I ran my own. That's how I met Jesse. Actually, we ran a marketing company for e-commerce businesses where essentially you could take the space in your box and sell that as advertising space for other brands. So Andie could either advertise in like a HelloFresh box or HelloFresh would advertise.
Yeah.
So we built a whole network around that. Jesse was one of our early customers from the DTC side.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But
so interesting.
So it's a long journey, but then part of why I joined Clearbank was for that reason of like, we built a very simple product to help with like solving issues like that. And I wish we had that when, our business, unfortunately, was never an e-com business. We ran a beauty subscription box, 10 years ago. And that was, certainly could have used Clearbank back then. But
Clearbank's a great tool.
Yeah. So anyway, that's part of why I joined, is just like these problems are so hard to solve, and you're going to, it's literally sink or swim. If you can't ship the product, you have nothing to sell. And that's it.
Then that's
Move on to next season.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, so my last question I'd love to ask you, you kind of touched on, eventually want to do something next. And so, actually I have two last questions, but I'll ask this first. What is left on your either personal or not what's left? What comes to mind when I say what's on your bucket list, whether it's personal or professional, in terms of an idea you'd love to build, or like something. Everyone says they want to travel. Is there a place you want to go? Something you want to learn? Like what are some of your other passions in life that you'd love to explore at some point?
Yeah. Well, one thing I've picked up, which you can maybe tell from behind me in quarantine during COVID, is painting, drawing, pastel. You may think that some people ask me if I was drunk when I made these or if a child made these. The answer is no and no. I was entirely sober and I'm an adult. But I love art. I love making art. And
Very cool.
so I think a pipe dream down the line is to like have a show, so like have
Mm,
more time to make art and then have a show somewhere. That would be, it's a totally
yeah,
different thing, but my path is not straight and narrow and never
why
will be.
not?
So
New York's a good city for that.
yeah.
Yeah. My last question I remember I was going to ask you, because one of my favorite routines I had when I would go to New York, I would always do, I don't know if you heard the studio called Tone House. It's my favorite.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's near Madison, actually, near 30th and Madison. It's like the
Hmm.
little psychotic workout you could ever do in your life. And then I love to go to Soul Cycle and and
Hmm.
he's no longer with Soul Cycle, but Ackman's class.
Mm.
He runs Atkins Army. But I was curious for you whether it's on now on your digital Soul Cycle bike or back then. Who is your favorite instructor? What would be your favorite kind of Soul Cycle class, music, vibes? Did you have a uh,
um
100%?
I love, I mean, this is not because we share a name, but Melanie G at
Yeah.
SoulCycle. I love her vibe with her classes. So I take those. I was actually not a huge SoulCycle like in class person prior to the pandemic, but my wife loves SoulCycle, so she's the one who got the bike. And
Very cool.
now I'm kind of obsessed with it. So when all the studios reopen, I'll be really excited to sort of be
Going
part
back.
of that. But for me, it was more of a COVID thing. But
Yeah.
I use Peloton. I use the Peloton like workout. Well,
Yeah.
you can't see, but I have a mat on the floor where I'll do like weight classes with Peloton
Yeah.
online.
Yeah. Well, I'm really in Toronto, my go-to is always Barry's, and in New York, I
Oh
would use the
yeah,
Chelsea studio. And
I
so
love
tomorrow,
berries.
that's who I'm interviewing tomorrow. So tune in this time tomorrow. I'll be
Oh,
doing an interview
cool.
with Joey Gonzalez, the
Oh, that's
CEO of Barry's.
awesome. I love berries. That was my studio
Yeah.
pre-pandemic. So
Which,
I'll
because
for sure.
you said you're where
I'm in the
in
West Village, but I used to live on the Upper West Side pre-pandemic,
okay.
and so is the Upper West Side's Red Room.
Yeah. Yeah. I would do, yeah, I was always in Chelsea. So I do the
Mhm.
Chelsea Red Room, either Mike Espinoza or we
Mm,
had Niv come to Toronto a few times.
wow.
He taught on the east side. And then who else is there? Austin Cagley. He always had like I love like sprinting on the treadmill. And so,
Oh my God, I'm excited for this to be open again. Well, I'll for sure tune in tomorrow to watch that.
yeah, it'll be super fun. But anyways, we're
Cool.
kind of wrapping up the time. So thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you everyone for watching. As we said, we have Joey from Barry's on tomorrow, and hope you have a great selling season for Andie
Thank you,
coming up.
thank you, thank you. AndieSwim.com for all your
Andie
swim
Swim,
needs.
AndieSwim.com, guys, check it out. Well, again, thank you so much, and we'll see you all tomorrow on the stream. Have a good day.
See ya.